This video will show you how to apply filtering to a dashboard. There are many different ways to filter data on a dashboard. First of all, you can filter the data in the underlying data worksheet or query. For more information, see the documentation or see the videos on preparing your data. Even at the dashboard level, there are a couple of different ways that you can filter your data. The most common approach to filtering data is to add filter components into the dashboard. For example, to filter a date field, you can add a range slider. The easiest way to do this is to find the date field that you want to filter in your data source and drag the field into the dashboard. This will add a range slider that filters the date in the data source, and hence filters all of the dashboard components that are based on that data source. In this example, the chart and the table. Another way to filter a date field is by using a calendar. To add a calendar, find the calendar component in the toolbox and drag the calendar into the dashboard. This calendar is not yet associated with any particular data field, so scroll up and find the field that we want to filter, in this case the date field, and drag the field onto the calendar. This associates the calendar with that particular date field. By default, you can now select a range of weeks, a single week for example, or by shift-clicking a range of weeks. Note that because the chart is grouped by month on the date field, the chart does not display any interesting information if we select a small set of weeks. What we might want to do is to be able to select by month. To do this, press the Switch to Year View button, which is the left button in the mini toolbar. This allows us to select a month or a range of months. By shift-clicking, we can select the range of January to June of 2019. If you want to be able to select a range of months across multiple years, press the Switch to Range/Comparison button, which is the middle button in the mini toolbar. The calendar now has 2 pages, so let's make some additional space for this calendar by moving the table to the top and moving the calendar over. Now we can select the years by using the arrow buttons in the top. For example, we can select the year 2018 on the left side calendar and 2019 on the right side calendar. Then we can select a range of months that spans across the years. For example, July to July. When you're using a 2-page calendar, you'll need to press the Apply button in the mini toolbar, that's the button on the far right, to apply the settings. Unlike the single-page calendar, the settings do not apply upon selection. Now let's take a look at filtering categorical or string data. To filter a string field or categorical field, you can simply drag the dimension into the dashboard. For example, if we want to filter on category, drag the category field into the dashboard. This creates a selection list. You can resize the selection list to display as many values as you deem reasonable. You can also display multiple columns of values. For example, here, if we had a shorter selection list, we could choose to display more columns so that the user could access all of the values. To control the number of columns, click on any cell in the selection list and grab the handle on the right side of the cell. This allows you to adjust the number of columns that are displayed in the selection list. There are a number of properties that you can set for selection lists. To access the properties, right-click on the selection list and select Properties. Here you can choose whether you want to display the list as a list, the way we have it now, or as a drop-down menu. You can also choose the sort order of items in the selection list, ascending or descending, alphabetically, or with the currently selected items always listed first. This is achieved by using the Hide Others option. Submit on Change enables each selection to be submitted as soon as the user makes it, which is the default. and the single selection option forces the user to select only a single item from the selection list. As we mentioned earlier, this selection list filters both the chart and the table because both of these components are based on the same data source, which is being filtered by the selection list. In some cases, you may want to filter hierarchical dimensions. For example, you may want to filter both category and product name in the same component. To do this, use a selection tree. Let's delete the selection list and instead add a selection tree. Add the fields that you want into the selection tree from the outer level of the hierarchy to the inner level of the hierarchy. In this case, category is the outer level of the hierarchy, and name, the product name, is the inner level of the hierarchy. Note that you can now make selections both at the category level and at the product level. If you want to change the hierarchy, you can right-click on the selection tree and select Properties, then select the Data tab. This allows you to make changes to the hierarchy levels, either by deleting a hierarchy level or by moving levels up or down. Note that you can also display a measure in a selection tree. To do this, make a selection from the Measure menu. For example, we might consider displaying the aggregated total next to each product in the selection tree. From the Aggregate menu, choose the desired aggregation method and press OK. There's also an option to display this graphically. Right-click again on the selection tree and return to the Properties dialog box. And then, in addition to the text option, select the bar option next to the measure. The selection tree now displays also a graphical representation, a bar, corresponding to each total. To format the totals, click on one of the total cells, then press the Format tab in the left panel, and from the Format menu, select the desired format. For example, in this case, you might select simply currency. To filter on a numerical field, you can use a range slider like we did before for a date field. Let's remove the selection tree. And let's add a range slider that will allow us to filter the total field. Drag the total field from the data source into the dashboard. This range slider will now allow you to filter the totals displayed in the chart and on the table. Note that this filter operates on the raw data, in other words, the totals that are present in the data source, not the totals that are aggregated on the chart. Later in this video, we will show you a method to filter the aggregated totals on a chart. To format the values displayed in the range slider, select the range slider, choose the Format tab in the left panel, and then apply the desired format. Here, a currency format might be appropriate, or a number format that uses a currency symbol. If you want to filter numerical data using a selection list instead of a slider, you can do that as well. Let's remove the slider and add a blank selection list simply by dragging the selection list component into the dashboard. Into this blank selection list, we can drop a numerical field. For example, the discount. Drag the discount field into the selection list to display the numerical values in selection list format. Another type of filtering you can do is ranking. Ranking filters out the top or bottom so many groups on a chart or in a crosstab based on some aggregated measure. For example, consider this chart. We might want to display only the top or bottom so many states according to one of the two different measures. sum total, or sum quantity purchased. To do this for a chart, open the chart editor, press the Edit Dimension button next to your dimension. From the rank menu, select top or bottom. Specify the number of groups that you want to select, let's say 5 states, and then select the measure according to which you want to filter. In this case, the top 5 states according to summed quantity purchased. Press the Apply button and press Finish Editing to perform the filtering. The chart now displays the top 5 states according to summed quantity purchased. Of course, we can put this in a better sort order. To do that, again, open the chart editor, press the Edit Dimension button, and then select a sort order such as by value descending. You can do exactly the same kind of filtering in a crosstab. Again, simply open the crosstab editor, press the Edit Dimension button next to the dimension that you want to filter. Here again, we'll filter the state field. Select from the rank menu either top or bottom. Specify the number of groups. Here again, we'll specify that we want the top 5 states, and again, according to sum quantity purchased. You can also specify a sort order, perhaps by value descending again. Press Apply, and the result is a filtered table that gives us the top 5 states according to the specified measure. It's worth noting that this kind of filtering can also be done by an end user, because the chart editor and crosstab editor are also available by default to end users. To see this, let's save this dashboard. And then let's open it in the portal. Here's the crosstab dashboard displayed in the portal. Note that the crosstab has an edit button just as it does in Visual Composer when editing. Press the Edit button to open the crosstab editor. Here the end user can set a ranking condition just as we did in the Visual Composer. For example, the user could choose to rank the states by pressing the Edit Dimension button, setting perhaps a bottom ranking, bottom 7, according to sum total, pressing the Apply button, and pressing Finish Editing to change the display of the crosstab in the dashboard. Let's return to Visual Composer. Note that there is another way that end users can filter a dashboard as well. To enable end users to filter a dashboard, in particular to filter the post-aggregate data on a chart or in a table, you can add a selection container. Let's make room here by resizing this calendar component and add a selection container into this space here. Drag the selection container component from the toolbox into the dashboard. A selection container can serve several purposes. First of all, as the designer, you can actually place selection components into the selection container. For example, you might consider adding a filter for quantity purchased into the selection container, as well as other selection components, perhaps one to select company or to select category. The selection container allows you to expand and collapse these different selection elements. This is helpful when your dashboard contains a lot of filters that would otherwise consume a lot of real estate on the dashboard. The selection container allows you to combine all of these filters into a compact unit. Another use of a selection container is to display in a single location all of the filters that are operating on the dashboard. To do this, you can right-click the selection container, select Properties, and enable the Show Current Selections property. Then press OK. This selection container will now display the current values of any selection components in the dashboard. For example, you can already see that the calendar has an entry there, and if we were to add other selection components, for example, a total range slider or a date range slider, or indeed a selection list or a selection tree, all of these selection components, all of these filters would have their current values displayed in the selection container. Again, this can be helpful when you have a dashboard that has many selection elements or filters, perhaps distributed across the entire dashboard. By having a selection container display the current filter settings, the user can look in a single place to see what settings are currently effective on the dashboard. But the property of the selection container that we want to talk about right now is the ability of the selection container to allow end users to add new filters into a dashboard. Let's return to the Properties dialog box for the selection container, turn off Show Current Selections, and then preview this dashboard. Press the Preview button in Visual Composer, or view the dashboard in the portal, to see the dashboard as an end user would see it. Note that we still have the selection container here, and note also that if we right-click on a point on the chart, there is a filter option. Similarly, if we right-click a cell on the table, we also have a filter option. This is an ad hoc filtering function that filters post-aggregate data, in other words, the data after it has been aggregated on a chart or in a crosstab. To apply a filter this way, again, right-click and select Filter. This displays the ad hoc filter as appropriate for the type of data that you're filtering, in this case, the summed totals. Here we can filter the post-aggregate sum total that we want to see on the chart. For example, if we were to select a range of 130,000 to 300,000, this means that we only want to see aggregated totals in that particular range on the chart. Click away to lock in the filter. And then note that the filter is displayed in the selection container. This allows you to further modify the filter or to delete the filter by pressing the Unselect All button, or by selecting Unselect for the particular filter. You can then add additional ad hoc filters. For example, you can add a filter that selects particular product names. In this case, the ad hoc filter that pops up is a selection list because that is the type of filter that is appropriate for a string type field. And here we can make selections of the particular products that we wish to see in the table. Again, click away to lock in the filter. The filter then appears in the selection container together with the filter that we added previously for the total. To clear all of these filters, the end user can simply click on the Unselect All button. Note that these ad hoc filtering features are only available if there is a selection container in the dashboard. If there is no selection container in the dashboard, end users will not be able to filter charts or other components in this manner. Finally, let's discuss two other types of filtering that you can do on a dashboard. The first of these is to apply a static condition without adding filtering components to the dashboard. For example, if you want to restrict the date range for this chart, but do not want the end user to be able to modify that range, you can consider adding a static condition. To do that, right-click on the chart and select Conditions. This allows you to specify a static condition such as date is in range of this year, for example. Append the condition and press OK to filter the chart to that specific range. This kind of filtering can be used for charts and tables as well, and allows you to restrict data in a way that is not intended to be easily modified by the end user. These types of conditions can be entirely fixed, or they can be based on user input, or session information, or scripted logic. For more information about setting more advanced types of conditions, please see the discussion of conditions in the data worksheet video set. For example, imagine that you wanted the filtering condition to restrict the data to either last year or this year based on a user selection. To do this, you could consider adding a form element, such as a radio button, that would give the user a choice of last year or this year. To enter these options, right-click on the radio button and select Properties. In the List Values area, select Embedded, and then press the Edit button, and enter the choices that you want the user to have. Last year, and this year. The labels are arbitrary, but the values should match legitimate ranges for the in-range condition operator, because that is where we intend to use these values. Press OK, and then give the radio button a meaningful name, such as Range Selector. Then press OK. This radio button allows the user to select last year or this year, but it's not yet connected to the condition on the chart. So let's return to the chart condition, right-click on the chart and select Conditions, and from the Change Value Type button on the right side, we'll select Variable. But before we do that, note that the actual legitimate range name is this year with a lowercase y, and last year with a lowercase y. This means that we'll need to change the values that we've entered for the radio button in just a moment. Select the variable option here, and then choose the range selector variable. This corresponds to the radio button that we named Range Selector. The condition that we now have here means that the condition in place on the chart will restrict the range to a range that is entered by the user from the Range Selector radio button. Press Modify to change the condition, and then press OK. Remember, though, that we need to change those values to match legitimate range values, so let's re-enter the properties for the radio button and make that change to the values. Note now we can select last year or this year, and the selection that we make in the radio button is used to change the condition on the chart. This illustrates how you can gain more control over the type of filtering that your end users can do. For example, here we've restricted the user input to choosing either last year or this year specifically for this chart. This is in contrast, for example, to adding simply a range slider for the date, or a calendar as we've done before, where these components, the range slider or calendar, give the user a much broader type of selection, as well as influence the entirety of the dashboard because they operate directly against the data source. In some cases, you may not want that kind of all-encompassing filtering, and you may want something to provide more limited filtering capabilities. Finally, there is a built-in type of filtering called Flyover filtering. This allows the user to fly over, for example, a chart or a crosstab and filter other dashboard components. For example, for this chart, we might specify that the table below the chart should be filtered based on the group on the chart that the user points at. To do this, right-click on the chart and select Properties, select the General tab, and in the Flyover region, select Table View 1. Table View 1 is the name of the table below the chart. Then press OK. Now, when the user flies over the chart, the table below the chart will be filtered automatically to display only data corresponding to the group on the chart that the user points at. In this case, it's the second quarter of 2018, now the third quarter of 2018. You can click on a group on the chart to lock in that filter, in this case the third quarter of 2018, until you click on another group or click in an empty region of the chart to release the filter. You can also specify that the filter should be applied only upon click and not simply on mouse over. To do this, again, enter the properties for the chart and in the Flyover region, select the On-Click Only option. This means that the filter will only be applied when the user clicks a group on the chart. As a final note, when you're looking at filtering a dashboard, also consider related features such as zooming and brushing on a chart, as well as highlighting. These are not pure filtering operations, but in many cases they can achieve the same result as filtering because they bring specific data to the user's attention. Please see the documentation for more information about zooming, brushing, and highlighting.